again, and welcome to Forum for a Better Understanding. You know, every year we love to celebrate the weekend that we dedicate to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And this year we did a beautiful celebration in January. This program that is airing in March wants to be a recap for you of some very important events. We had something that we had at Fresno Pacific that was a first-time event. We're going to talk about that. We have three guests today who are very, very, very much committed to Dr. King's vision, to Dr. King's reality, and we're going to have them share what they're doing together and separately to keep the vision alive here in Fresno. To my left is a new guest we've never had on the program, is Eric Payne, who was recently elected District 3 trustee for the State Center Community College District. Eric is also at the Southwest Site Director for the Building Neighborhood Capacity Program, a federal initiative here in Fresno to help our neighborhoods come back to life. In the center of our panel is Reverend Dr. Karen Crozier, who has been on programs here on a very important program of the new Jim Crow. Karen is a professor, educator, minister, and scholar activist at Fresno Pacific University, committed as an agent of God's love, hope, and justice here in our world. And definitely across from me is someone we all know because he was in the B. It's the Reverend Booker T. Lewis II, who is involved at the Rising Star Missionary Baptist Church as their pastor, and also committed to night walks, helping bring back security and safety in our neighborhoods. Thank you all for being here today, and I wonder if we could begin by having that very first question that you'd be wanting to share with me. What is it that you do that you would want people to know is the most important part of your passion for this community? Eric, what is the most important thing you do?
Well, I think I wear two hats. So the first hat would be as site director for the Building Neighborhood Capacity Program, which is a federal initiative through the city of Fresno and the Fresno Housing Authority, where we look to transform distressed communities into communities of opportunity. So essentially, we want to mobilize residents to advocate for their needs around economic development, education, and so forth. And then the other hat that I wear is as a trustee for State Center Community College District. And one of the most important things that I do there is help moderate post-secondary education from a two-year institutional standpoint, and really help elevate the platform of post-secondary education within urban and rural communities that have a high need.
And we definitely do here in Fresno and all over the valley. So thank you for that new election, for that new position that you have among us. We're so glad you were appointed, that you were elected by us, and that you will do work that will be very, very important for all of us.
Thank you.
Karen, with so many things, what would be one thing you find you are mostly passionately committed to?
Well, like Eric, I wear multiple hats. At Fresno Pacific University, I'm not only assistant professor of practical theology, where I serve in the seminary as well as the traditional undergraduate biblical and religious studies division. I'm also a special assistant to the provost for peace and justice initiatives, where I provide the King celebration that will be taking place on January 25th, 26th, as well as Peak Circle Conversation series around the church and the new Jim Crow, bringing the university and community people together in order to help the church understand what's our role in light of the various injustices that continue in our midst, and how we can respond redemptively as the Church of Christ.
Redemptively. I love that.
Yes.
It's not to salvage something, but it's to make it redemptive, to really and truly give it its truest, deepest possible meaning. Thank you, Karen, for all you do at school and also in the community. Reverend Lewis, what would be one, or I guess we're agreeing on two things that people do, so we're letting you say two things.
Two things.
Of the many things, Reverend, where is your passion?
Well, my passion is doing everything that I can through the church to help my community and to help the people in my community achieve all of their goals and aspirations in life, and to live better and to have every opportunity to live better that we can offer them. I love what I do. I love pastoring, and pastoring to me is getting actively involved in the lives of the people. I believe the church ought to do evangelism. We ought to equip the saints, but I think we also ought to be involved in social action and care for those in our community.
We are so glad that the three of you are here today, when normally you would be engaged in much more important things than being on a panel with me. This is a respite from their real work. This is my real work. What I'd like to do right now is have the three of you take a chance to step out and tell us about that magnificent event that was held at the university January 26th and what was it?
25th and 26th.
25th and 26th. We have a little flyer that we're going to put up right now. Can Greg post that? And Karen, can you begin? And then I'd like Booker T and Eric to share what is it that you wanted to accomplish? What is it that was the heart of the celebration at the university and at Christ Church?
Well, the theme is celebrating, a celebration, remembering and renewing King's dream for peace. And the subcolon is spiritual resources for political and social engagement. And you notice is at the end of the month, not around the typical time in which we celebrate King's holiday and birthday. So it provides people with a different understanding and a vision, because I think King has become too domesticated amongst our politicians as well as our churches. And we're not reviving or remembering his true critique of various structures and systems and the people that were in them that was doing injustice and violating the rights of people, of not helping us to live together in his vision of the beloved community. And so King, especially towards the end of his life, as he was sharing around the critique of the Vietnam War, connecting the economic realities here in poverty in the U.S., as well as racism and militarism as the big three evils in his mind. And so we have lost that as a church, as a community, and made King this nice guy. King was nice in the sense that he wanted you to live to be the best human you can be in who we are together. And so this celebration helps us to look at what are the spiritual resources that we need in our various vocational and public servant and community organizing, as well as educational capacities, in order to remember and renew his dream, his vision, as well as our pastors. What are our pastors doing to think about what is happening here in the Valley and how they engage, as our Pastor Lewis has shared?
Karen, it's obvious that this is part of your work at the university, and it was great that you are there and that at Fresno Pacific there is this venue for doing such a powerful prophetic presence for Reverend Dr. King. Pastor Lewis and Eric, can you tell how you got involved as not being on campus? How did you get involved with Karen and this wonderful project? Booker T, can you begin?
Well, I think my relationship with Reverend Crozier developed through her very active interest in Night Walk. She's a great supporter of Night Walk. She's actively involved in the walk itself, the strategy, the planning of strategy, the building of resources, and connecting, helping us to learn how to connect our residents that we encounter on our night walks with resources. And she's also actively involved in helping us to develop a strategy for proposing changes in our policies, the way that we operate, the systems, and the way the systems operate here in our community, so that we don't have people in our community that are alienated or left out of opportunities that they should have as citizens in this city. I believe that what we hoped to accomplish, and is to revisit the memory of King. I grew up in Greenville, Texas, 50 miles east of Dallas. I didn't move here until I was 16 years old. I have some personal experience with racism. I grew up with my daddy believing that he was the voice of King in that small town. I remember riding in the back of a car with speakers on top of the car, repeating the messages of King. As he heard those messages, he repeated those messages on the loudspeakers on top of the car. We would sit in the back seat and ride with him. And so the watered down version of King that we experience today in our celebrations, that we experience today in our community, that version of King is not the version of King that I remember. I believe that King marched for justice by way of peace. I don't believe that he walked for peace. I think peace was the method by which he walked. Nonviolence was the method by which he walked. But the goal is always justice. And so when we march, we ought to march for purpose. When we march, we ought to march to reach a goal. We ought to have something in mind that we're trying to accomplish when we march. We shouldn't just march for show. We shouldn't just march to demonstrate what we're doing in the community, but we ought to march so that we can help others achieve justice in their areas of need in the community.
Well, it's obvious that Karen is not alone in her passion. That is for sure. Yeah. And it's obvious that Reverend Lewis definitely knows what the role is of celebrating correctly, appropriately, Reverend Dr. King's honor. Trustee Payne, where would you find yourself being, I think, younger than the others? Your knowledge of King is, let's say, even further removed from the man. How did you get committed to this project, and what did you bring to it, Eric?
Well, I think essentially I met Dr. Crozier as a community organizer prior to me moving into my electoral role. And, you know, a lot of our work was geared around community development in the built environment. So how do we transform our communities into communities of opportunity when communities are faced with such high levels of distress, such as poverty? And so really analyzing the economic impacts of how to transform those communities is how we initially came to meet each other. But I came into this project really wanting to support her in her movement for peace within her communities. I was born and raised in the Southwest Fresno community, and so I realized that violence, guns, drugs plague my neighborhood, and having that reality, I felt as though I needed to do more to address those needs. And so I came across this sister right here, and I was willing and ready to get to work to address that.
I am so glad that we have today a panel of people that not only this year, popular stuff that easily is celebrated, it is the tough, hard, aggressive, nonviolent, but just rooted. Justice, not peace, is what is our goal. We'll take a break right now and be back to find out what else we're doing and what else you're going to be invited to join as we see the second half of our program. Stay tuned.
KNXT TV is proud to say thank you to all its viewers who have given their support for over 25 years. And only through your support is KNXT able to provide spiritual and informative programming. Please remember KNXT in your long-term support through wills, bequests, trust, and plan giving. Your gift is important to the future of Catholic television. Help preserve the strength of KNXT's message based on the teachings of Christ. Keep KNXT in your future plans.
Welcome back to the second half of our program, celebrating the honor, the memory, but also the commitments of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We have talked a little bit about a celebration that was celebrated at the end of January, but we are now going to want to take a phrase from one of Dr. King's presentations and have our panel parse it. They're going to tear it apart and tell us the essence of this short sentence, which really becomes a leitmotif of justice, liberating message, a prophetic message of Dr. King. Let's put that on the screen, Greg, and let's have us discuss peace is not merely the absence of conflict, it is also the presence of justice. Karen, you're the one who gave us the phrase to put on the screen. Start letting us know why you wanted to discuss this.
Well, I think many people in our contemporary context do not understand King's understanding and commitment to peace. Our brother here says that peace was a method towards the end of justice. And for King, negative peace was just the absence of conflict, because people were in their place, they were controlled and dictated by the powers that be. But for King, true peace, as the quote there, is not merely the absence of conflict, but it's also the presence of justice. So when we look at unjust laws and policies, King called upon us to be transformed nonconformists to those unjust laws and policies. So we're to remain maladjusted to things that are not contributing to our true sense of peace, to our true sense of justice, which is wholeness, harmony, and integration in the world, and that we are caring for all of God's children. And so therefore, it provides us with a way to understand that King understood nonviolence and peace as both a means and an end, which is inclusive of justice.
Let's see if we can really be precise on what justice might mean in practice here in Fresno, and where injustice might be accepted peacefully. Eric, what would be one thing in your work, in your ministry, and in your challenges in your career that you see as an unjust situation that you, in your work, are meaning to amend, change, correct, challenge, and overturn? What's something you're working on in justice?
I think we all measure our accomplishments and shortcomings differently. Some people use numbers to scale, and some people count the money in their savings account. But what if we decided to take stock as a nation to evaluate how we treat our children? We know that every 8 seconds that a child drops out of school, or every 32 seconds a child is born into poverty, or every 47 seconds a child is abused and neglected, and every 5.5 hours a child is killed or neglected. So what if we were to take stock and look at it as, how are we doing as a nation to serve our children? If you look at those numbers, it's disheartening to say that, when Dr. King's reality was, we want to put America back on their feet. And if we analyze it from that perspective, then we've got a lot of work to do as a nation to help close in those gaps.
Reverend Lewis, what is a concrete issue out of the many that you grapple with that you would say, it's an unjust thing, Jim, that I'm working nonviolently, but it's unjust, and I want this thing exposed for what it is? What's an injustice you're dealing with?
I think one injustice that we're working on is the fact that in Southwest Fresno, Darling International doesn't have the same CUP or follow the same CUP requirements that other companies in the city are required to follow.
Tell us more about that.
Well, concerned citizens of West Fresno and other groups are asking Darling International to, and actually asking the city to require them to go through the same CUP process that other companies are required to go through, including churches, when they want to build and do business anywhere in the city. And so that's one injustice. It's unjust to have the number of processing plants and trash dumps that you have in Southwest Fresno concentrated in that area. It's unjust to have the lack of development in Southwest Fresno that we have, the lack of resources and commercial development in Southwest Fresno. We need to, the city should encourage, as much, do everything they can to encourage developers to build up and revitalize Southwest Fresno as much as they do other areas in our city. That's unjust. It's unjust to have a higher concentration of illiteracy and a higher concentration of dropouts in neighbors that suffer through poverty than other neighborhoods in our city. So, the list can just go on and on about the injustices that we wrestle with in our city. And so the goal is to do things to bring these things to the attention of those that can help to turn those situations around.
Karen, what would be for you, who probably I think would have a litany of things that are on the to-do list, the justice list, what would be one that maybe Reverend Lewis didn't mention that you really are on top of, that you see it as being crying that Dr. King, were he here, would be on this one? What is one of them?
I don't know if I can make that claim that it would be this one, but what comes to mind as you pose the question, Jim, is the new Jim Crow, and that's the one that my brother did not mention, although great list, brother, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
The new Jim Crow, the text by Michelle Alexander, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness, provides us with the contemporary analysis of what's happening to underprivileged, underserved, black and brown, poor communities, and being disproportionately represented in our prison system that's highly connected to the economic blight that exists in our communities, that is highly connected to the malfunctioning and miseducation that is connected in our schools, in our poor communities. And so what Michelle Alexander claims is that the fabrication of the war on drugs that occurred back in the 1970s under Nixon and that came to fulfillment under Reagan was a farce for their political gain. And now we have black men who have less rights than many black men and black people in the 1850s. And so therefore, this mass incarceration, this funneling into the prison industrial complex is the new civil rights of today that is highly interconnected around education and economics, as well as housing and our voting rights, because our brothers lose their right to vote in many states, depending on the states they live in, once they get a committed felony crime. And so therefore, more and more and more black men are ending up in prison and not present in their churches or their religious institutions or their families or communities. And when they come out, they cannot go back, because if their families are on Section 8 housing or receiving federal assistance, they can lose their subsidies because of the family member. So where are we sending our black and brown brothers for petty drug crimes? That is the new Jim Crow and the issue that is high on my list that I have been engaging.
We want you to know that all of our programs at KNXT are on YouTube. So if you go to our website at knxt.tv, you will find us there, and also on Facebook. Our YouTube listing includes the 4 programs that Karen and other panelists shared at depth, insights into the new Jim Crow. We hope that you'll watch this program on YouTube, and that you'll invite your friends who maybe missed it when it aired, that it's on YouTube. Regarding what Karen said about brown and black brothers who are more than the average person incarcerated and penalized for being who they are, would you, as representatives of that group, be able to share how it is that you are deciding that this will not be perpetuated, that in honor of people like Dr. King, whom we don't want to just pay lip service to, but we want to stand marching with, what, Eric, can we do concretely to turn around this caste system that is an unjust system that we are having in our country?
Well, I think essentially that we've taken Dr. King's works and his famous "I Have a Dream" speech, and we profess the basic principles of that speech. But America has a schizophrenic personality, where we profess the basic principles, but the inherent principles behind the writings is going to take bold action. And we're weary to do those things because we hear things like equity, we hear things like unjust, and it's really going to take a call to action, and the realization that the urgency is now.
Pastor Lewis, could you have a final thought on this?
Well, I believe that the church can play a key role in turning our families around, building healthy families. I think that the church has to play an active role in helping to develop our young men into strong men of character and integrity, men that take responsibility for their families. I think that once you rebuild the family, I think then you rebuild the community. I think that I think that's a key point, because we have to start developing our young men early, being involved in the process of their education. We have to start rebuilding, keeping our families in places where they can accomplish positive goals, so that as our young men grow, and we need to mentor them as they grow, so that when they come of age, that they have options that are more options than hustling on the street, selling drugs, but they have options that will help them to achieve their educational and career goals, and then allow them to become the productive fathers and husbands that we hope them to be for their families.
I want to thank our panel, who have given us many, many challenging, provocative statements about how we can live out the dream of Reverend Dr. King. Let's commit to that vision and not pay it lip service.
Ashe.